wherever somebody may be in their faith journey, from the cradle Catholic who's done it all their life, there's always more to learn. Jesus is always calling us to come closer. Maybe you're a lapsed Catholic who's not coming to Mass anymore. Come closer and restart that. And Jesus' love is so incredible. One of my favorite parables is the prodigal son. It was the minute he saw that the son was returning, he ran to reestablish that relationship and to take that son back. So I can't imagine living my life without that rock of my faith right now.
Welcome to Open Seat, the podcast where we create a space for authentic conversations about faith, unfiltered and unapologetic. Here, we believe that every story matters. Whether you're questioning, seeking, or steadfast in your beliefs, you'll find something relatable in these heartfelt discussions. So grab your seat, get comfortable, and let's dive into today's story here at Open Seat. So today on the Open Seat, we have Superintendent Nate Parker joining us today.
Good to see you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. So tell us a little bit about Nate.
I'm married with 4 children.
Uh-huh.
I have a freshman in college, and I have a junior in high school, a freshman in high school, and then I have a 6th grade daughter. Grew up in St. John's, Michigan, just north of Lansing, and first came to Lenawee County because I was an Adrian College student, so I spent 4 years at Adrian College. I got my teaching certificate and degree, and I went and taught Spanish for 5 years at Morenci, and then I became the high school principal. I did that for 10 years, and then came to Adrian as the principal at Springbrook Middle School. Did that for 12 years, and then there was an opportunity, and I applied for the superintendent position, was fortunate enough to be selected, and this is my 3rd full year of doing that. So I've been in education for 26 years. 1 year before Morenci, I was at Columbia Central at the Alternative Education Program.
Wow, so education's a huge part of your life.
It's kind of what I've done.
Did your parents grow up as teachers?
They did not. My father worked for GM, was a tool and die maker. My mom, for a while, was a stay-at-home mom, and then she was a youth minister for a little while, and then she was a director of religious education for several years at St. Jude in DeWitt, then finished her career just recently. She worked for Faith Magazine.
Oh.
And they're both now retired.
I think I've had a chance to talk to her on the phone. She's a nice lady. She did a couple of articles with kids down here.
Okay.
So,
yep. Maybe. And she
Yeah.
was mainly not writing, but editing and organizing and pulling things together. But I think she may have written a few articles.
Yeah, she was great to work with. I give her all the props in the world for being youth minister and director of religious ed. That's a really hard job, I hear. So
Right. You've been there. I believe it was separate. She was youth minister first, and it was not a dual role at the time like you're doing.
And speaking of that, you're helping teach confirmation this year. So how's that going?
Good. I enjoy it. I enjoy the kids. Some of them are Adrian kids that I know a little bit from that, and some are not Adrian kids, so it's always good to meet. It's great working with Michelle. She's done it for a while and knows what she's doing. I learned a lot more about my faith by being in that role, and I think we learn that when we're teaching others. We learn a lot ourselves. So we were a member of Sacred Heart Parish starting when I was in Morenci, and until I became superintendent. We lived over by Hudson, so I taught 7th and 8th grade catechism there for 5 or 6 years as well, and I've learned a lot more about my faith through doing that as well.
Can you give us some examples of things you've learned about your faith through teaching?
I think just a deeper knowledge, and we're constantly learning more, and it's a journey, and we learn the basics as coming up as kids, and the more you can read the same thing or hear the same thing and in another way every time you hear it, but then as you're teaching and trying to help others to understand as well, it takes you to a deeper level, I think.
I know I learn all the time from the kids. Jesus talks about faith like a child, and that's really what it is, right?
Right.
So you were at Sacred Heart, and now you're here? Parishioners here?
Yes.
We're happy to have you. We're happy to have all new people. So bring some friends next time when you come.
Okay. Yep. Hopefully I can do that.
It's one of the great joys in my life is watching the kids when they walk in and see your teaching, because a lot of times they see you in a different role. So has anyone said anything to you like, oh my gosh, I didn't know you were Catholic, or
I really haven't heard that yet. I have a few of the kids that say, hey, your son's in my class, but not
those alarming
right.
things. Yeah. So have you always had a strong Catholic faith or develop over time?
I think it's always been a big part of my life. I attended Catholic school, and then 7th and 8th grade went over to the middle school, public school, and St. John's, where I grew up, had just St. Joseph Catholic School was a K-6 program, so we went there and then went over to the public schools. My parents as well. It was big part of their life, and we were going to be in church every Sunday, no matter where we were or what we were doing. There's always a place you can find a Catholic Mass, and I think that's something I've tried to make sure with my kids as well. And obviously, life is busy, and you're on the road sometimes on the weekends, but a lot of good things about being Catholic, but one of them definitely is no matter where you are, you can find a church, and you can find a Mass time and find a way to get to Mass on the weekend. And that was one of the subtle things, I think, is we were going no matter where we were, and I've continued that. And obviously my mom and her role as a youth minister and a DRE, it was obviously a big part of her life, and my father as well in a more subtle way, but you knew for sure that he was prayerful and he was committed to it.
A lot of times I hear people say their children fall off if they've been a DRE or youth minister because they had to spend so much time at the church. Was that ever an issue for you?
You know, it wasn't, because it wasn't that we were there that much. When we were young, she was a stay-at-home mom. As we got older, she took on some of that, and then the part of as a DRE was really after we had grown up. So that dynamic was a little bit different in that regard because it was the timing of when she was doing those things.
Yeah, because I hear it's a common thread amongst people who are like, oh yeah, our children don't go to church anymore because I had to drag them all the time when they were little, or, you know. Do you have a hard time getting your kids to go to church?
You know, not really.
Oh.
It's just, I think, because we've always done it, they know
It's
it's
a
what we do.
requirement.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not a conversation, really.
I can speak to your daughter. I've coached her now in basketball this
Okay.
year. And she did a fabulous job of walking the faith. There was this interesting dynamics because they all knew each other and they were
Sure.
all friends. And I watched some things unfold, and Casey just had the outlook of optimism, like, oh, that person wouldn't really do that on purpose. Well, we all saw it happen on purpose, but that's okay. And she's like, I don't think she really meant that. And a couple other times she had displayed her faith, not in like a in your face way, but just in a very public way, which was interesting. So is that something that is instituted in your house? Like we're working really hard to promote what we do on Sunday? Because in a lot of cases we go to church on Sunday and then it stops Sunday.
One thing we've done, I don't know, maybe it's been the last 5 years or so, is we do have Wednesday night is prayer night. That could mean we watch an episode of The Chosen. It could mean we listen to, and Father Joe Krupp was the priest at Sacred Heart when we were there for a while. He now puts his stuff online.
Yeah.
He's up in Flint somewhere. So it might be we listen to that. We might read the readings for the next Sunday or whatever. That's one intentional thing we've tried to do. And I think the rest of it is, it's not, in the day-to-day, just you got to live your faith. It doesn't do any good if it's just ritual and tradition, which those things are important. But if it's not changing how you live and what you do in your daily life, we're missing the boat. So treat people the right way, and we're here to help others.
So how does your faith play into your job? You're in a public school, separation of church and state to an extent. How do you think your faith plays into your choice of career?
I mean, education is definitely a service industry, and our faith tells us we're here to serve others. So whether it's a public school or a Christian, it's our faith tells us we're supposed to serve. And I think educators, that's why we do what we do, because we want to serve people, we want to help others, we want to be there for people. So how we talk or rules and statutes and regulations and stuff, it still doesn't mean that we can't serve people, and we live our faith and we witness just by how we treat others. And that's the core of our faith. It's how you treat others and what you're doing to make that next person's day better, to make sure that they're moving forward in life. And I think at the core, that's what we do as educators.
Do you get a lot of interaction with the kids?
I try to make sure I still do. Obviously, as a teacher, and then as a building principal, you get a little bit more separated, but you got to make it a point to do that, because that's why we're there, is for the kids. And if you get too far separated, you lose that anchor to what you're doing. So I try to make sure I get in the buildings. And it's nice that Adrian, the superintendent's office, is at the high school. So daily, you can walk the halls and you can do that. And I schedule to get into the buildings. So on my weekly schedule, there's go to this elementary, or start my day there, and just intentionality. I can't imagine not having that energy from the kids, because that's what keeps you going.
I imagine it could get bogged down with paperwork or meetings.
Yep, for sure. You just got to schedule it to get
Yeah.
into the buildings and see what the kids are doing.
So how has that helped you intentionally scheduling all of these things? Like, If you don't do it, does it throw your whole week off?
Sure. Yeah, I think if we're going to make the most of the time we have, you got to schedule things. If it's on the schedule, it's going to get done. If it's not, it might get done. The busier things get, the more we get involved in, the more that schedule is important.
What have been key components to keeping your faith strong for you?
Again, as I've mentioned, just making that commitment, we're going to find somewhere to go to Mass. That feeds you every week. That's the center of what you do, and it's that worship, but also the lessons you hear there in the homilies. I think I get up early and spend probably a half hour. I read the daily scriptures and then spend some time. I might, like right now, I've made part of that. Oh, what's the book they just gave us? The Three Ordinary Voices of God. Because, as I've said, even if you schedule it with my job and with kids, the rest of the day is crazy. So I try to get up early and make that first half hour of my day is something. The daily readings, and there's other things I might do, or once in a while pray a rosary, or sometimes just sit and pray and ponder, and I think that's been key. This podcast would be one example, but we are blessed that a lot of people in the church are using social media to get the word out, to amplify the word. And again, I mentioned Father Joe. He's got several podcasts during the week. Yep. I try to, there's a lot of garbage out there on the media, so I try to make sure if I do have time to be on media, it's something that's positive. And, I do some professional things as well, but trying to feed that faith and listen to other people talk about it and their experiences is key to doing that.
You talk about social media and the faith. It amazes me when I talk to kids. I'll say something about the rosary or something random. And they go, yeah, I learned that on TikTok. I'm like, what? Excuse me?
Right.
But there are a lot of positive resources. We just have to look at what they are.
Correct.
And the kids can help you find them. It's amazing to me. Like, we'll talk about the weekly reading for Sunday Gospel for middle school, and the kids will be, yeah, I saw that on TikTok.
Yes. No, if it's again, it's like anything else. There's a lot of good uses of it, but there's a lot of garbage out there, too, that we got to make sure we're monitoring what our kids are doing and what they're on it. But you're right. If used in the good way, it can bring the gospel into your home and to your kids.
Do your kids use a lot of social media? Because you have all different ages.
Sure.
Right?
Yep.
College to sixth grade?
So, yes, they do. None of my kids got to have a phone until they were freshmen. So I think we delayed it some, but yeah, they're on. But we also monitor it and we talk about it. There's positive uses of it. And when they're in college classes and stuff, some of that stuff is handled through there. So, yeah, you can't avoid it, but I think you can talk about it, monitor it, and make sure it's being used in a productive way.
So your parents were a big instrument in your faith growing up. Was anybody else instrumental in your faith growing up?
I can mention some uncles and aunts and probably some teachers and those types of things. But specifically, most of my uncles and aunts were also Catholic, and it was important to them. Family definitely is the big one, I think I would mention.
It's always interesting to me when people come on here and they'll say like a name of a teacher. And we've had that a couple of times. The interesting thing about a teacher is oftentimes it doesn't just end at that day.
Right. That's always one of the biggest rewards of being an educator is when a student or somebody comes back and mentions how important your whether it was your class or just a conversation. Right. And I coached for quite a while too. But yeah, there've been students who've done that, and it's flattering. You're honored by it. It's one of the, I guess, the intrinsic rewards of being an educator and working with kids, that you have that impact on some of them.
What kind of advice would you give a parent to help them impact their child in a positive way about their faith? You have some family dynamics which are super helpful. How would another family get there? Because oftentimes, like, parents will be like, I can't get my kids to go to church. You have any suggestions on that realm for them?
I think obviously starting when they're little, in that it's just what we do. I think you got to do it from the time they're young. And I think, I'm trying to remember what book it was. Anyway, it was a book about fathers and people writing in about how their fathers impacted their life. And I'm trying to remember the name of the guy. He used to do one of the Sunday shows. But one of the stories that somebody had sent him was about how when their father died and they were talking about memories of him, one of his memories would, he'd say, I remember I would see him when I'd get up in the morning or go to bed, and he'd be kneeling down at the rocking chair praying, and that he never really talked to us about his faith. He never really spoke about it or pushed it. But the fact that I saw him told me how important. And then all of the other siblings shared, I saw that too. That impacted me. So obviously you want to talk to them about it, but they need to see you practicing it in that way, and it doesn't have to be a deliberate way. But if they see you praying, they're going to know it's important to you. If they know that, hey, every Sunday, no matter how busy it gets, we're finding a way to get to church, it's going to become important to them.
I can't imagine with a son in college. Does he live at the school?
Yes.
So it's a deliberate choice to come home because you could hide out at college when we're doing all these family activities.
Sure.
I don't want to go to church. I'm going to hide out at college. But so it's got to be an intentionality on his part too.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he is, fortunately, he's at Adrian College, so that's not too far away, but he's not always with us, but I always tell him I got eyes everywhere. No,
I have seen him at 8
Yes.
o'clock Mass by himself.
Right.
It's a nice sight to see because, here he is. I'm like, oh, are the Parkers coming? No, just him. It's okay.
Right. He knows it's important, and it's important to him. That's nice for me to see, too, that he does that.
Is it interesting to have your children in the same school you're the superintendent of?
I always wondered how that would be as I was coming up as a young educator, and you heard people who said both and made choices both ways, that there were people, they wouldn't go anywhere else except for him. You heard other people say, I don't want them working in the same place I am because I want them to have their own. And so I always kind of was curious how that all would go. And what I would say is it's been great. It really has. There's never been an issue with it. I believe what we do at Adrian Public Schools is great. We do great things. I believe in our staff, and we have great people working there, so why wouldn't I want my kids there? And they have had outstanding experiences, and I also think I've been able to keep the separation good, that I'm, wanting them to be able to be who they are. It'd be interesting to see what their take on that is, too, and, I've never really asked them deliberately. I just know the staff have been great, and they've had an awesome experience at Adrian Public Schools.
We were talking to Patrick McDade,
Okay.
and his dad taught, and so he had his dad as a teacher. And he was glowing about how wonderful the experience was. I think some of it is Tom McDade was a phenomenal educator. But
Yes.
He said, I heard for years all these stories about history, and then I finally got to be in my dad's class, and it was real. So
Right.
I just always wondered how that would, on the opposite side of that, how does that look?
And obviously, when I've had them, I've been the administrator, not their classroom teacher, so there's some separation there, too. I think it's been neat is when they're middle school students, so at that time, we were still living over by Hudson, so we had about a 25-minute drive. That meant I got 25 minutes in the car with them every morning, and a lot of times 25 minutes on the way home. And we all know how important those middle school years are. Kids are becoming who they are and making choices and decisions, so that was just kind of an unintended perk of having a 25-minute drive every morning. When they were in middle school, they'd come to work with me every morning, and we got to spend that time in the car. And sometimes it was silent, there wasn't much said, and other times there was, but how often can you say I've got 25 minutes of undivided time with my kids?
That's true. I think what you do in those 25 minutes is so important too. Right. Because, like you said, sometimes it's just silence.
Right.
But it's the presence of you're in that car.
Yep.
They know they're safe. And sometimes it's talking about everything that happened or is going to happen. So do you miss that time then? Do you get that time by yourself now on the way to work?
So no, we've moved into Adrian now. We've lived here for about 3 years now, so now we're 5 minutes from the school. Again, and there's a lot of perks to that as well. I mean, now that I'm home more, and again, the age they're at the school all the time, so it's a perfect place to be right now, and we love Adrian. But I will say, I do kind of miss not having that. We get the time other places, I think, but, and now, of course, 2 of the 3 drive, and the other one in high school, they ride to school together. But when Casey's at Springbrook next year, I'll probably make sure I take her. And even though it's only 5 or 10 minutes, that'll be a good morning for us.
One of the things that I think you were involved in is sports as a parent. How do you make faith a priority? Because I know it's a good thought to say that when we travel, we go to church. But how do you make it a priority? Because travel sports aren't set up for families to be involved. So how does that work?
I say this with all humility, is that in all the time we've done travel sports with all the kids, there's never been a Sunday we couldn't find a mass somewhere. Sometimes it's at 7:30 in the morning. Sometimes it's to 5 o'clock. They've gone in baseball uniforms. I guess having said that, yeah, it is difficult because they aren't set up. But I'm trying to remember, the name of the app slips my mind. Masstimes.org, I think it is. And we use that all the time. Okay, we're here. This is where we are. All right, where's the masses? Where's the game schedule? Yeah, I mean, with 4 kids soon, we're in a lot of different places. But that masstimes.org, boom, this is where we are. What are the mass times? Where can we go? And it's always possible, and I think if it wasn't, we'd probably be missing a game to make sure we get to mass.
It's a priority, right?
Right.
That's the key to all of it. I guess my number one question right now is, because you work with children, what advice would you give a child growing up today about their faith?
To get to know more about Jesus and the faith. In Father Tom's homily, I don't know, a little while ago, that you should hear the voice saying, come closer, come closer. And no matter where you are, you can always come closer, you can always learn more. The story of Jesus is amazing. What his life is amazing. What he taught is amazing. You never learn it all. We always have more to learn about it. And that alone, seeking to learn more about Jesus and to cling to Jesus, whatever is going on. We're going to falter. We're going to have struggles. We're going to have doubts. That's part of the whole journey, but always clinging to that rock of he died for us. He loved us. Our God came to earth to be with us because he wanted so much to have relationship with us that he was willing to be tortured and killed for us, and then rose, and that's somebody you want to learn more about. You want to learn everything you can, and I think that is, whatever your doubts, whatever the struggles, whatever the barriers, if you holding on to that, I need to learn more because of what he did for me. I need to learn more.
What suggestion would you give someone on a daily basis to try to improve their faith?
I think take some time for silence. And in that silence, some spiritual reading, the daily readings especially, that's another benefit of social media, the internet.
Yep.
There's so many sites out there. You have Catholic daily readings, and that's another cool thing about the faith is that every day there are prescribed readings, and it truly, you can read through them in about 5 minutes and then sit in silence and reflect. And our world is so noisy now, it's so busy, that I think you got to take time for some silence in reading the word of the scriptures every day. Wherever somebody may be in their faith journey, from the cradle Catholic who's done it all their life, there's always more to learn. Jesus is always calling us to come closer. Maybe you're a lapsed Catholic who's not coming to Mass anymore. Come closer and restart that. And Jesus' love is so incredible. One of my favorite parables is the prodigal son. It was the minute he saw that the son was returning, he ran to reestablish that relationship and to take that son back. So I can't imagine living my life without that rock of my faith right now. I'm by no means am I perfect, or by no means am I doing everything I probably should be doing as a Catholic or as a follower of Jesus, but I feel fortunate to have so many positive examples of the power of the faith and the power of just every day try to get a little closer, try to learn a little bit more, and reflect that light to other people, because a lot of people need that light.
If people would like to talk to, I'm thinking children especially,
Sure.
would like to talk about their faith with you sometime, is that a possibility?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Because I think you shared some things that would be helpful, but people may not know how to get into reading the daily readings or those sort of things.
I'd be more than happy to any way I could help.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Parker, and we appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you, and thank you for what you do and for having this podcast, because I truly think this is one of the benefits of media. We can get this message out to people, and the Gospels are an incredible message.
Once again, we thank you for joining us today. We hope that wherever you find an open seat in your life, you will invite someone to join you.